Okay. So good evening. Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate you all coming and joining the 320 Coalition and their 10 days of action honoring Osaze's legacy. Today, we are talking about race and criminalization. And I found some great members, not only of 320, but members of their own prospective organizations. And they're going to be here to talk to us. So I want to introduce each one. First, we have Nick Pressley. And he, as a formerly incarcerated activist who has spent the majority of the last 2 decades living in State College, Nick has worked on issues relating to social justice for the past 7 years in a variety of roles. Recently, seen turning out Black voters in Western PA, speaking out and organizing against mass incarceration in the Commonwealth as a whole, and training other directly impacted activists around the country. Nick is committed to mass liberation and of solidarity with the people from a variety of different backgrounds and all walks of life. So say, hey, Nick, wave to everyone. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great. Next, we have Devine Lipscomb. Devine is an undergraduate adult learner studying rehabilitation and human services at Penn State. In a working capacity, Devine serves as the Special Projects Coordinator for the Restorative Justice Initiative, RJI, Penn State, and is the president of the Students Restorative Justice Initiative, SRJI, the advocacy arm of the larger organization. RJI is a higher education and prison program that seeks to grant degree-bearing credits to individuals housed in the carceral system, utilizing education and tools and recent services. Devine is also the founder of Corrective Gentlemen Incorporated, a nonprofit organization focusing on the advocacy and mentoring while serving as a conduit for people who have been impacted by systematic inequalities, working to bridge the gap between municipal government agencies and community members and those affected by incarceration. Devine is a recipient of the 2020 Stand Up Award for Ethical Leadership and the 2020 Outstanding Adult Student Award. So everyone, welcome Devine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you, Devine. And that last but not least is Terry Watson, the founder of BWMP LLC, has been presenting the Battle with Moses people since 2014. Through this historic lens, he engages participants in the dialogue of what happens when Black Lives Matter meets Blue Lives Matter. The Battle with Moses Peoples challenges the perspective of others while encouraging civil discourse from all. Mr. Watson hosts a webcast called Moses People Speak, featuring law enforcement, educational institutions, and community members and organizations whose missions is to participate in the conversation of criminal justice reform. Recently, Mr. Watson founded BWMP LLC, a platform for law enforcement officers of color to engage their communities and build trust through their narrative. In addition, Mr. Watson has interviewed law enforcement officers around the country to document their narratives in his book called The Battle Continues with Moses' People, pending publication. So thank you so much for joining us, Terry.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
And forgive me for stumbling. You guys have so many accomplishments. I can't even get them all out at one time. So now we're going to have our little icebreaker, right? And so these icebreakers are questions from a game called In Case of Racism. It's a really good game. And so I'm going to ask you guys these questions, right? And they each have 3 multiple choice answers, but you are welcome to make up your own answer. You don't have to use the answer that's in the multiple choice, but I'm going to give it to you guys anyway. And just because you guys come from different backgrounds, I really want to see, are you guys really going to agree on these questions, disagree? And they do relate to race and criminalization, but you guys will tie that in with us. So the first question is, a white person has threatened to call the police on you while you were minding your business. Do you A, leave the scene, B, stay and wait to talk to the police, or C, make Ken or Karen go viral? And you guys can raise your hand or you can just speak. It doesn't matter to me.
I'm going to wait for the police to show up because I'm going to hopefully provide some education to Karen and the police.
I'm going to make them go viral. And there's a twofold reason for that. It's not just to shame them. It's also to protect myself.
Yeah.
Um,
Divine.
I'm gonna do both, right? One, because I'm not afraid to have conversations with officers, right? I've grown past those stages in my life where I need to flee a scene, um, but also um, to protect myself and to make sure that the community sees that I don't pose a threat to you, so you shouldn't be posing a threat to me. Um, and so I'm gonna do both.
I think it's interesting that none of you gentlemen said leave the scene. Can either one of you or all of you tell me why you feel you would not leave the scene?
I think what Devine just said too, to piggyback what he just said, is that in this country, especially black men, have been seen as a threat for too long, and by leaving the scene, we don't want to. I know I wouldn't want to add to that narrative, you know, um, because we need to change that narrative in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, not really a runner. Definitely, definitely more of a
That too.
confront this. But I like what Devine said, right? Um, you know, about how it'll be multifaceted. I've had to be informally incarcerated, had to work through some issues and fears when it comes to dealing with police. I think we talked about on a Black Tea episode of some of the situations that have come up, and so for myself to continue progressing in this path, I need to continue to work on that. So being able to confront these issues head on while maintaining a civil discourse is super important. I also don't want to reward this person by leaving, because in order to change behavior, there's positive and negative feedback, and I feel like positive feedback in this situation would not be ideal long run.
So as a formerly incarcerated person, I'm not leaving, right? Because once the police show up and Karen points them in the direction that I went in, they will follow me, right? And the first thing that's going to pop up is you're a criminal, right? You have this background, and so you fled the scene. Therefore, you were guilty of something. So no, I'm not leaving. And then I also, at this point in my life, I've learned to have an attorney, right? So I'm really not too concerned because I'll call my attorney, wait for the police, and make you go viral. So
I like
I like
that. I really like what you said, Nick, about rewarding someone by leaving. I think that's a thing that the listeners need to keep in the back of their head. Okay, next icebreaker question. And I'm pretty sure everyone has gone through this before. A sales associate is following you around the store with a walkie. Do you A, turn around and spark a conversation? B, ask them why they are following you? Or C, try on everything in the store but purchase nothing? Of course, that's a funny answer, but yeah, we've all gone through that. So it's the best
But
way to confront it.
I'm going with D. Answer is D. I am going to say, can I help you? Because I want them to know that I see them. I see you following me. And my perspective is that you are following me, and I give them the chance to correct themselves. So my answer would be D. And funny, Tierra, that you said that there's something that happened to all of us. I wanted to know for the first question because I have had the cops call on me uh, plenty of times. I want to know if that am I the only one that experienced that in the past? Okay, yeah, all right.
No, only again, I have to be very having been in contact and when you're under supervision, right? Which some of which I have been, I am, to be full disclosure. I have to be careful when I have contact with the police, and I have to make sure that it is all up and up, because just simple contact with the police can end up to lead to reincarceration. As far as this statement goes, I mean, I agree with you, Terry. Can I help you have a conversation to also show them that not only am I do I see you, but other people will see you too. and if the behavior continues, then I would leave without spending a dime in that store and not spend a dime in that store again, and make sure my friends don't spend dimes in that store.
And just because I'm difficult, right? I would need more context for that, right? What store is it? What am I there purchasing? If it's something that's important, should I allow this person to disturb my presence, whether they're following me or not? Who's the purchase item for, right? Because if I'm purchasing something that's worthwhile, and I worked hard either way for this money, I'm probably going to leave without confrontation, because I don't do confrontation well, and so I will remove myself and not spend any money. However, if it's something that I was sent to the store for, I'll go ahead and make my purchase and pretend they don't exist, because actually you don't, right? You only exist if I give you the attention to exist.
Yeah, I like that one, and I like that you came up with your own, Terry. D, how can I help you? Okay, or can I help you rather? As you all know, we're here and we're doing this panel in honor of Osaze Osage, and a lot of people, including the 320 Coalition, especially, but even people outside of that, agree that his race played a part in his murder. And many even say that maybe if he had been white, suffering from a mental health issue, and been served a 302 warrant, he might still be here. So the real question is, why do race and criminalization go hand in hand? How do you explain this to someone who does not believe that race and criminalization should even be put in the same category? Whomever would like to go first may speak first. And yes, so what is that? Why do they go hand in hand?
So this is a really complicated issue, with a really complex answer and and an even more complex solution, right? We can go back to the 13th Amendment and how it included a clause in it that the only way that you were allowed. So let me actually start at the beginning. So the 13th Amendment, for those of you on the call who may not know, was the amendment that freed the slaves. But as a part of the amendment abolishing slavery, there is a clause that says the only time slavery is allowed is when you're incarcerated. Seeing as how Black folks were the engine for the economics of the South at the time, a new engine had to be discovered. And then suddenly you start seeing Black folks getting arrested for things like loitering, and then being thrown in a plantation camp, and then going back to picking cotton. We've seen permutations of this throughout the decades since then. And I think that is kind of how criminalization has become synonymous with our skin color. I mean, there's more reasons. That's a really simplified explanation, even though that's kind of complex as well. I mean, I'm of the firm belief that a large part of our issues in this country stem from poverty, and that race issues have been superimposed over poverty, so that you've got poor Black folks and poor white folks at each other's throats, so we can't actually solve these issues of poverty. And that's kind of how I've seen it. I think it plays out like that across the entire world.
Yeah, that's a really complicated question, and I typically look at race in a very different way. When people try to talk about racism or being racist, they see it as a term in which there's actions to it, right? I created a racist act, or I don't have a racist institution. And to me, I always ask the question, and what's your secret? Because we in America have, since the inception of America, and I'm glad Nick brought up the 13th Amendment, because let's keep in mind that the 13th Amendment, it was the product of it. It was it freed the slaves. It wasn't the reason why it was thought of, or the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't because we had some moral obligation to free the slaves. It was because, and Lincoln said it himself, he could have save the Union without freeing the slaves, he wouldn't have done it. Right. So when you look at race, it's one of those things that I always say, when someone says I'm not racist or I'm not part of this racist institution, I always ask, what's your secret? Because in this country, you could find a black girl, show her a white doll and a black doll, and she would see the black doll as evil, and she would see herself in that black doll. And the white girl would say the same exact thing. The black doll is evil. So the question is, how did you escape that consciousness in America? And that then you start to look at the criminalization that comes with that. Because if you as a 4-year-old girl can see a black doll as evil, then as an adult, you grow your whole life seeing that black doll as evil. So the question I always ask is usually, how did you become the exception when you're looking at race and racism? But that's a good point, Nick, with the 13th Amendment. I always focus on that too.
And to follow up with both of those responses, I believe just the way we are socialized, right? The way this country is socialized with the context of slavery, 13th Amendment, the way we contextualize the hierarchy of the country, right? Someone has to be dominant, right? And so since the white culture has always been seen as dominant, that makes us subdominant or beneath them, the minority, right? It's in the language that we speak, right? It's in our schools, right? Our school systems, like just the punitive nature, right? We're taught even as children that we don't have the same equities, right, or the same room to be children, right, as white children do, right? If I do something in class like speak out of turn, I could be sent to the principal's office, whereas little John is going to be told to be quiet or sent to a corner in the classroom, right? So that has a lot to do with race. It has a lot to do with who's educating us, right? So even in our schools, our educators are predominantly white, right? And so there's always this hierarchy of where white people, where race plays a part, right? Very, very, not very often do we get to see those positions of power switched, right? Up until recently, right? I don't even want to start with Obama because there were some folks before him that had positions of power, but representation in these spaces of power has lacked most of our childhood and even in our school systems. So I believe a lot of it comes from not having representation. And then who's the criminal, right? Reagan era, right? We cannot skip Reagan era and how being Black literally became synonymous with crime and drugs, and how we've been penalized since then.
And you know, and I think you really hit a good point with representation too, Devine. Reagan era, I mean, even to the Clinton super predator comment, 90s, you know, I must be reading you, Tara. Tara, but even to that comment in the 90s, and we see it in all of our media. We see it in our present day, you know, on TV. In our news coverage, when we've got coverage of a Black person or a brown-skinned person committing some kind of crime, they are covered differently than if it's a white person. We even see it with the Black Lives Matters march. These marches these past summer compared to the insurgencies from those nuts and yes, I think you're all nuts in the Capitol in January, okay, and how the difference of coverage there, the difference of police respondents there. We see it when I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine earlier today about digital blackface, about how you know, folks, and what that is when folks share memes or gifs of Black folks doing something that's very stereotypical and that denigrates Black folks. And when white folks share that as a means of you know, being funny or something like that, but really what you're doing is continuing to expand this stereotype that Black folks are this way or Black folks are that way, you know. the fight with the Dr. Seuss stuff. Not even a fight, because that's something that happened, and it happened from the Dr. Seuss Foundation decided to do this. There was no external pressure, but then you got all these folks losing their minds over it, saying, "How dare you remove these misrepresentations of Black folks from our media?" And so it's an integral part of this society. Every representation of Black folks on our media these days needs to be very, very looked at very closely to make sure that they're not exasperating any of these stereotypes or continuing to link Black folks in crime.
I really like that term, digital blackface. I really like that. It's very appropriate just because of the social media era that we're in, and people aren't understanding that it's not just about you creating it; it's about you disseminating and perpetuating those type of misnomers and stereotypes, and we're seeing it everywhere. And you all mentioned the 13th Amendment, and I just wanted to also bring up things like the Black codes and the new Jim Crow. And like you were saying, people were going to jail for loitering or going to jail for being in mixed race couples, or going to jail for being in sitting at a diner. So like there were so many ways we were criminalized. And you guys said something and it made me think about it. So I'm just going to try to squeeze this question in. You don't have to answer it, but what do you think when you see things like the little Black 9-year-old girl who was thrown in the back of the car and assaulted? I'm not sure if she was one of the ones pepper sprayed to so many of our Black children. Or I watched another story of a little Black 9-year-old boy who was like accused of touching this white woman's bottom, and it was really his book bag that brushed against her. And I don't know if any of you guys have seen those things. But Nick, you just made the point, or Devine, one of you made the point of how we're portrayed differently in the media. So it could be like these young white teens are doing something, but these Black men are over here doing something else, and they're the same age, right? So I just wanted to see if I could squeeze that in before I ask my next question, and what you guys feel about that.
When I worked with the ACLU of Pennsylvania, which was a few years ago, we did a lot of work, and they still do a lot of work around the state on the school to prison pipeline. It's one of the worst here in Pennsylvania. We've got school resource officers, and the statistics show that in Pennsylvania, your cops in schools are more likely to accost Black children, that Black children's first encounter with the police are happening in schools more and more. And you get them put on probation or parole or probation while they're in school, and then they start getting violated or trapped in the probation system. There's technical violation after technical violation, and now you've criminalized a child for doing something that children do and need to be corrected from doing, but that should not be criminalized. The examples you're talking about, that's what that rings true to me. And again, it is this complete portrayal, of what a Black person is. We're typically acted like we're grown when other children of other races are given the opportunity to make mistakes as children. Black children are more often to be tried as adults, more often to be, told that they're adults, and treated like adults and not given the chance to be children. And this will be my final point, but I want to point out that even though we know all this, right, our schools, including State College Area School District, because I have a stepson who's in high school here, and so I know, still teach erroneous things, or still gloss over, the new Jim Crow, or still gloss over what happened during, or the fact that Reconstruction was kind of just given up on and replaced with Jim Crow, and all the issues that Black folks have historically faced. Our schools still do not address that appropriately. We still look at a history that's completely whitewashed, and then we add on top of that this disparity in the way that Black children are treated in this state. And I'll finish with this point. Pennsylvania has one of the worst racial disparities in the entire world in our criminal justice system. In fact, Pittsburgh has one of the worst racial disparities in the entire world. We're talking worse than like China. Like we are really bad. Pennsylvania itself is a driver of mass incarceration in this country.
Terry, Devine.
Well, I that's a really good question, actually, and I would take a different look at this. So As you know, I deal a lot with law enforcement, and I remember I was speaking with a chief from a let's call it a large city population, and he was trying to convince me to do the battle with Moses people with their organization. And we had a good conversation. And then towards the end, and by the way, the chief is white, and that does plays a point in this conversation. So at the end of that conversation, he says to me, you know, Terry, I didn't grow up under a rock. He said, you know, I know that when I was a kid and I got in trouble, I got my butt whooped, and you know, I was taken home by the cops and I got my butt whooped. But for African Americans, they get sent to juvie. And I remember that conversation so clearly because my response to him was, did you know that prior to enter law enforcement, or did you develop that after you got into law enforcement? Because as we know, law enforcement is the first step of people entering the criminal justice, right? You know, it being criminalized. And so as law enforcement, I always try to challenge them, like, if you know that there's this inequity that exists, what are you doing about it? Especially if you're in leadership, right? It's one thing to say, I know that there's issues that exist, and then not do anything. I think that makes it worse, right? So going back to your question, I think that when we look at the what Nick was saying, so to really dive into the issues that come out of Pennsylvania, and trying to look at the issues of the school to prison pipeline, I think one of the focus we have to do is start challenging law enforcement and the role that they play in and dealing with that, and say we have to change it, and we have to change it now.
So yes, I've seen the videos. And so my question, I have a question in return, right? Is, if you can do this to our children, right? Why should I feel like I'm any different, right? Or if I hold a special place? And if I can't protect my children from you, what makes you think that I should give you the trust that you feel is deserving of you, right? You're treating children like cattle, right? Like you don't even treat animals like this. Mike Vick went to prison for a dog, for dog fighting, right? You are abusing children with no repercussions because you're law enforcement, right? So how do you expect trust if you can do that to a child? I will go to jail if I body slam one of my children.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna leave that right there.
Okay. My next question for all of you is to just tell me briefly about the organization that you're representing and how they are playing a part in trying to alleviate this race and criminalization stigma that we have here going on here in State College and all over the world as well. Whoever would like to start is fine with me.
Sure. So with Strategies for Justice, you know, one of the first of all, we are a speaking and training bureau that deals with race, disabilities, and law enforcement, right? So that we are very specific on what we're trying to do and what we're trying to target. But the one thing that I have seen over time is, as we talk about injustice in America, there is currently injustice in law enforcement itself. The actual law enforcement. So I'm thinking about what Devine just said, right? You know, that the if you can't treat my children with humanity, how can you prove to me that you could treat myself or my as an adult with humanity? I'm asking the same question in law enforcement. If you can't treat your own police officers with humanity, how can you say you could treat the community with humanity, right? So, as you know, the Carrier Horn, right? The Monica Blakes, the Nakaya Jones. It was amazing. There was this. I wrote a piece. I said, when a conscious mind cry. I remember I was in Buffalo, New York, and this is after all the interviews that Carrier Horn did, and the CNNs, and they're all doing the interviews, right? And I'm sitting next to her. The first interview was the CBS one, and they asked her a question. And again, the question was, how does this impact your children? And she just totally broke down in tears, right there. And I was like, okay, can we cut the interview? Because let's take a break, right? And I'm sitting next to Cario, and we're just chatting, and we are exchanging words between us, and I'll keep that between us. The night I went back to my hotel that night, and I remember, I was like, that was crazy. Like, holy shit. Like, whoa. Because you sort of see the pain that she went through for so many years for stopping the choking of a handcuffed citizen, which she should have been praised for. And I remember waking up the next morning, and I totally broke down in tears because I realized that in my young life, she's been fighting this battle literally my whole life. Like, I just entered her life for a couple of years, right? And I'm thinking to myself, if you can't treat your own people who are sworn to protect, wearing the blue, putting their life on the line, how can you then say to me, you're here to protect me? So I really, when we talk about what my organization does, that's what we do. We're shining a spotlight on the injustices inside law enforcement, taking those narratives to hope to push legislation to change it from the outside as well. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
So the organization I'm representing today, because I'm
Like that.
that's real though, because I tend to try to immerse myself in a lot of things, actually probably too many things, to be honest. But I'm representing the Students Restorative Justice Initiative today. As the president of the organization and a member, we are the advocacy arm for the Restorative Justice Initiative at Penn State, which is a prison education program that's been in the making for, it's been in existence for about almost 6 years now. And the goal is to create access and pathways to higher education for individuals who are incarcerated. As the advocacy arm, our goal is to create awareness of the injustices and the policies that are in place that create barriers for people either incarcerated or re-entering the community from incarceration. And so a lot of the things that we've been working on lately are like defund the police legislation, where we're trying to have conversations with Penn State Police. There's some things that's happening that we haven't sat down yet, but it's in the process. One of our executive members has been in a lot of the meetings with SRO officers, the conversations about SRO officers. We're also looking at the future, right? What does that mean, right, for these practices? And so we've already successfully had one restorative circles training. We're looking at having another restorative circles training. And what restorative circles purpose is to try to reduce harm. So when harm is caused, we try to bring the two parties together and the community and try to mitigate the harm that was done. The goal that Students Restorative Justice Initiative is looking towards is creating a platform where we're building community before the harm even takes place, right? It seems like it's an impossible task because a lot of the times people come to restorative circles once harm is created, right? But I don't think that's the way to go, right? I think, and I believe wholeheartedly that if we start to know one another and be in community, not just live in the community, but be in community with one another, one, that in itself is going to mitigate harm, right? Because I know you. I'm not going to commit a harm against my friend knowingly unless, you know, I'm in some kind of crisis myself and I'm not able to ask for that help, right? And this is old Devine looking from a perspective of someone who willingly commits harm, right? I know there are situations where people create those type of harms, and so we want to focus on that, and then we want to focus on figuring out how to literally create pathways for returning members to get into school or find ways to into counseling or scholarship programs. Like, I mean, the goals are vast, right? It's just a matter of how much can we tackle all at once and what's realistic. But our goal is to create those pathways and to utilize what we learn in the classrooms and put them in practical examples. And yeah, so that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Devine. And Nick.
Yeah, I'm here today, also wear many hats typically, but I'm here today representing Renegade Organizing. Renegade Organizing is the startup created by my wife, Jenna Henry, and I, along with our really good friend, Aaron Wise. We are dedicated towards mass liberation in all of its forms. I see an interconnectedness between problems of ecological justice and economic justice and racial justice and criminal justice dismantling. I don't like criminal justice reform. And it's devoted towards operating outside of the party lines in order to get this, right? Much like what Devine was saying, and you know, I am at heart an abolitionist. I want to see an eventual abolishing of the police state, an eventual abolishing of prisons. In order for us to get there, though, we have to become in community, create safer communities. In order for us to create community and create safer communities so that we do not need police, then we have to start to organize around what it is that we envision as a future for our communities. And so Renegade Organizing is at this point working on convening an envisioning circle. I will be sharing more information about that with folks as it comes along. But we will also be training organizers and activists from around the state and creating a statewide network of folks working on issues in their local areas and providing support and kind of filling in the cracks in between these local issues. While it's important that we focus on issues individually, it's also important that as we do so, we keep an eye on the big picture and see how, everything is interrelated. And Renegade's dedicated towards doing that.
Thank you, Nick. So I have questions that are coming in from the audience that I would like to give you guys a chance to answer, because I can save my little funny racism questions for another time. I want to get the audience. Greg says, how can we follow the endeavors of all of your organizations? So anybody want to give a brief on how they can follow to all of that?
Mine's real quick. We're still real brand new. Keep an eye out, Greg, and you'll see it on my social media, and we will be promoting it when the time is right.
And we're on all social media platforms. We're not very active on Facebook, but SRJI on Twitter and Instagram. I can put it in the chat once I find it.
And for me, I put the website in the chat box. We are also on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram as well. And I think as Tiara mentioned earlier, I do host a web show called Moses People Speak, which you know, we have some really good conversations on that one, and you know, that's really where a lot of the good stuff take place.
Hi, I'm just going to interject here for a moment. I'm sorry.
No.
Moderator interjecting here. We will have all of these links available on our Facebook. We are streaming this to Facebook. So we're going to put those links in the comment section. So if you're not able to get those links right now in the chat, we will provide them for you.
And Maggie, if you had any other questions from the audience that I don't see, you're welcome to ask them now.
So we have a little bit of an extended question here. So one of our audience members asked, to what extent does the 14th Amendment granting of citizenship to Black persons make moot the 13th Amendment qualification regarding slavery? That is, if all incarcerated persons are quote unquote citizens by the 14th Amendment, then they cannot be chattel. For example, even death row inmates who are pregnant do not have their child put on death row, as chattel slavery transferred chattel status to the child of slaves. The 14th Amendment grant of quote unquote citizenship seems to prevent any citizens from being chattel. What do you think?
Ooh, from lived experience, I can tell you that's not valid. The 14th Amendment in a lot of ways still does not apply to anyone who's been incarcerated, simply because you don't get all of your recognized rights as a citizen. And so once you're incarcerated, you lose your right to bear arms. Most of the time, with some exceptions, you lose your right to hold public office, and you also lose your right to vote. That on top of hundreds of licensures that you're not allowed to obtain for employment, and so you're pretty much pushed out of society, and you left on the realms or the end of societies, and trying to figure out how to provide for your family. And so if we were considered citizens after incarceration, then all of those rights would be fully restored, and they aren't.
So I saw this question come through, and I loved it, but it's super complex as well. There are three definitions of slavery. There's forced labor, there's chattel slavery, and then there is bonded labor. And so when slavery was abolished, what type of slavery was still allowed by the 13th Amendment was not specified. What we see within our prison system right now is forced labor slavery. It's a different type of slavery than chattel slavery that was existent during slavery era in the United States. What the Devine said is correct. I always have to make this caveat. In Pennsylvania, you are allowed to vote if you have a felony and you are on the street, whether you're on probation or not. So it's not one of those states where you lose your right to vote because of a felony. That was changed in, I think, 2001. So it hasn't been like that forever, but it has been like that for the last 20 years. However, and you also can vote while you're incarcerated, it's provided that you're not incarcerated on a felony charge. However, the fact that you can't vote if you have a felony while you're incarcerated means you're losing one of your rights as a citizen of the United States. Further, the 14th Amendment specifically states that no state can remove this citizenship from you, but it's not the state that is doing it per the 13th Amendment, it is the federal government. And so I think that is I would love to get a constitutional lawyer in here and talk about this. I'm sure this has been challenged and maybe challenged in the Supreme Court moving forward, but that's an excellent question with a lot of nuance to it, right? And so that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, there's a brother by the name of Dwayne Wright, Dr. Dwayne Wright. He used to be a student here years back. I remember him. He was a graduate student, but he did an argument, an amazing presentation, the first versus the 14th Amendment. And I remember I was listening to this brother give this presentation. I was thinking to myself, wow, I got to have him come and speak here at my unit. And the one thing that his argument really was, we have to look at all the amendments before the 14th Amendment, because when those amendments were written, you weren't thinking about me. Okay, now that you're saying you're thinking about me, let's take a look at all the amendments that proceed before that. And so I always ask the question when someone says, I'm not, in this institution, what's your secret? Because again, from the founding of it, we were thought of as 3/5 of a human, right? And so, just to piggyback on what you said, Nick, I'm really on board. Just want to add that nuance there, that there is a conversation that, when these amendments were brought to to legislation, we were not included in that conversation or thought of as being human.
And can I just say maybe a kind of unpopular opinion, something that drives me nuts, and not dressed towards anyone. I don't think this not, and this has nothing to do with the question, but in the United States we have this issue of relying on the Constitution and forgetting that it's a living document that's designed to be changed. And like Terry said, was not written with folks who look like me in mind for the first 12 amendments, you know. And so we always hear about the Constitution this and the Constitution that, but we need to realize that the Constitution is not the be all end all. It's not gold and infallible. It's got many flaws in it, and that we should treat it as a living document that it is.
And just to be a little bit extra and add on to what you and Terry just said about looking at everything before the 13th, well, you know, I didn't get, you know, I wasn't able to vote, wasn't able to drink out the same water fountain until a couple more of those passed too. So I'm ready to look at all of them. You know what I'm saying? That's where I am, because it just needs to be revamped. Maggie, do we have any more other questions from the audience?
Yes, we have another one here. So this question from the audience member: how can you get more local youth involved in each of your respected initiatives? I'd like to address Devine as well in his program. Do you offer any mentoring opportunities for local youth?
First, for the organization that I'm representing, I don't know what Penn State's rules and regulations are regarding youth outside of campus. So I will have to get back to you with the answer to that question. As far as my program, I mean, sure, I can. We can talk about that offline if someone wants to help me finish developing it. It's there. I've mentored formerly incarcerated folks, but nothing past that, because there's other things that need to go into designing a nonprofit program. So, I mean, if you want me to talk to some youth, I'm willing to do that also.
And same, honestly, we're so new, so I'm going to jump in. We're so new that, you know, there's a lot to be designed still, but I firmly believe that nothing changes without the youth involvement. And so, you know, I've written and developed internship programs in the past for a couple of different campaigns in a couple of different states, working on developing an internship program for Renegade, but that's more of a long-term thing. In the meantime, you know, I do work very closely with a local high school student on political issues, and very proud of the work that she's doing. But willing, yeah, much snaps, and completely willing to continue to do that and have conversations with local youth about how to get involved with this, especially when I talk about in Renegade ways.
Yeah, so with our youth involvement, I take a different perspective on it. Besides trying to, mentorship is important, by the way. I'll say that. We definitely need more mentors. But with our organization, we try to listen to our youth. And we, as the older folks, try to be mentored get mentorship from them. Okay, because we understand that we can talk a lot, but sometimes we fail to listen to what they're trying to say to us. And our youth are smart. Let's get that right. They're smart. They have way more things to their fingertips than we had growing up. And so with our organization, the only thing that we've done so far is a What is Justice competition, which was asking youth to answer the question, what is justice? And actually last year, the topic was Osaze Ozagi. And each year we look at different, because there are a lot of families out there too that are hurting, and I want to highlight their families and their situations. But we need to listen to our youth, and I think that's one of the things that our organization really strive to do.
Thank you. So while I'm waiting to see if anybody else from the audience has a question, I'm gonna throw one of these questions in at you guys again, okay? So your register comes up short at work and your white boss only questions you. Do you tell them A, to pull up the cameras? B, do you put in your 2 weeks notice? Or C, do you tell them who did it?
No more snitching over here. Nobody snitching.
No,
Not snitching.
No. A and B. Nah. Like pull up the cameras and here's my 2 weeks. I'm like facts. And this has happened to me. So in-state college.
I want to tell you right now, let's not get this. Let's get this straight. It could be a black boss too. They treat you the same exact way. I'm not giving anyone a pass. No, I want to see the cameras. I feel like this is like the movie Friday. Like you get fired on your day off. No, not this ain't happened to me. No, you go look at those cameras together.
So that's a hilarious question, but I'm going to take a little serious note to that, only because my 2 previous convictions as an adolescent was robbery, right? And so when I first got to State College, I interviewed at a lot of places, right? And for $8 an hour, I had an associate's degree. You know, I deserved more than that because my degree was in business, so I knew I had the ability to earn more. And it wasn't until Greg and Lenny Mussey, previous owners of the Autoport, and Kathy Punt, they gave me an interview and they hired me to be the night auditor, right? So I had training for a week. My first night alone was graduation night, 2010. They left me at the desk to close. I counted over $4,000 by hand. It was like $1 short. And literally they were like, dude, you're fine, right? The first time anyone has ever trusted me with that amount of money. I've never snuck so we call it sneak thieving. I've never been a person to sneak thief. And so if someone ever accused me of taking something, you know, the only way that would be true is if I took it from you. If I ain't take it from you, I ain't take it. And so in situations like that, I think the fact that you didn't give me the decency to go check the tapes yourself before you came and spoke to me, I'm gonna quit. Right? So it's a matter of trust, right? I've never lied about my criminal conviction. So you knew before you hired me that I had this conviction, and then you questioned me about stealing something. Yeah, I'm gonna take that pretty personal. So yeah, I'm sorry, I went a little.
No, that's good. That's good. You're bringing it right back around to the purpose of this topic. I think we have one more question from the audience, and then I have another funny question that I'll get out the way. Wait, maybe 2. Let's see, Maggie.
Yeah, so we have 2 questions here. So the first is going back, Terry, can we see the results of that competition you mentioned anywhere?
Yeah, so what will happen is after the symposium, I'm going to open up the next round for What is Justice, and then you'll see the last year's first, second, and third place winners. But that will happen after the symposium because all the energy in my organization right now is being shot towards that symposium.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question here from an audience member. There's a comment first and then a question. Hi, thank you all so much. Is there anything that is being done / could be done to bridge the gap between State College residents and residents of correctional facilities like Rothrock in the area? I know there's a tendency for correctional facilities to be located in and very distant / hidden from majority white rural areas, and State College seems to be a good example of this, or is it?
So State College or Center County has 3 adult correctional institutions in it and juvenile, if I'm correct. We've got Rockview, we've got Benner, which are both state prisons, and we've got Center County Correctional Facility, which is the county jail. Those are all located in Bellefonte on Benner Pike, between State College and Bellefonte, with the Center County Correctional Institute literally being like basically in Bellefonte, right? I think people don't understand who's being incarcerated in our county jail. And I'll focus on that and give other folks a chance to focus on the state stuff. People, no, it's all good. You're good. No worries. I saw the response there. It's okay. It's a common mistake. People don't understand who's being incarcerated in our county jail. Our county jail is filled in Center County with people who were unable to pay their fines, who have a tech violation, meaning they may have missed a meeting with their probation and parole officer, and so they're reincarcerated on that. Or people who have drug addiction issues, which is actually by far the most common reason to be incarcerated in Center County Correctional Facility, is drug addiction, DUI. There's also some simple assault and domestic violence issues that you often see in there. But these are people who need treatment as opposed to incarceration. And yet the stigma of being incarcerated in Center County then means that when you come home, you can't get a job. Look, I have elected multiple people. Okay, helped elect the mayor of Houston, helped elect the DA in Philadelphia, helped elect the senator, the U.S. senator in Michigan. Okay, and I turned out thousands upon thousands of Black voters in Western Pennsylvania. I claim the victory in Erie because Erie went blue this year, and we have a President Biden instead of a President Trump. I will claim that. We dropped 40K in that city, right? But I cannot get a job at the Minute Mart on College and Atherton because I have a felony for selling weed to an undercover cop at a party almost 20 years ago. Or because I spent a little time in the correctional facility when I had mental health issues, just like Usagi was dealing with, and I did not get them treated. And so I spent time in the Center County Correctional Facility as a result of some of that stuff. And because of that, I cannot get a job at a Minute Mart in this town, but I can still be trusted to lead $1 million campaign. And so we need to really understand who is being incarcerated there. And we need to show up when it's time to elect the people who lead to our incarceration. District attorneys, magisterial district judges, which you don't have to be a lawyer to be. When there's a reentry coalition that is held at the Center County Correctional Facility that purports to speak for people like me, but there's no community element to it, and it's really just filled with people who are paid to be there. And no offense to anyone listening who's paid to be there, unless you're one of those folks who's not helping and actually harming. There are, I have strong feelings about this, clearly. There are many ways to get involved, but we just have to be aware that they exist, right? And be able to raise our voices and let them know that they're paying attention. Did you know your county commissioner, Michael Pipe, is the leader, is the head of the prison board of inspectors? And so anything that happens in the Center County Correctional Facility, he's got to answer to. And yet when Center County was refusing to test people inside for COVID-19 this past year, Michael Pipe sat on his hands. We've got people who are incarcerated on tech violations, and yet our district attorney and our magisterial and our president judges are telling us that only the worst of the worst criminals are being incarcerated in Center County Correctional Facility, and yet they're still locking people up on bails they can't afford to this day for misdemeanor charges. These people need to be held accountable. That's how we deal with it.
And I think we have one last question. Can we squeeze it in, Maggie? It is like 6 o'clock on the dot.
Yeah, I think this question is really important, and I think it's a great way to round out this wonderful event. So we have a question here from the audience. What can we do in our everyday life to change the effects of race and criminalization?
Okay, 1 minute, everybody. What can we do in our everyday life to change the effects of race and criminalization? Yes. Awesome question. Whoever asked it, that is a great way to round off.
Listen to Black people. To the Black women.
Check your biases and vote for progressive candidates.
I'm going to say ditto to both of those. Actually, that's exactly what I was going to say. I actually wrote it down here on a cue card. So, so you guys are right on. And I would say, once you hear Black folks, believe them.
And one fine tuning on Devine's point. Local elections, anything up to the statewide level, and anything that's not a president is a popular vote election. Your vote counts, so vote. You're not gonna hear me tell you to vote for president as much as you'll hear me tell you to vote for your borough council members or your district attorney or your MDJs.
Or your school board. Hey, one more thing I'll say, and then Nick, this goes back to what you just said, is beware of the difference between representation and presentation. I think sometimes we get a lot of presentation out there and not enough representation. And I'll leave it at that.
I think that's.
Can I steal that? Because I'm gonna use that for my next show, honey. That's gonna be a topic. Yes.
I'll tell you what. During my training for police, that's my first slide.
Okay, so I will steal it then, as long as you know, like, yes. Does anybody else want to add anything else when it comes to race and criminalization? I really appreciate you guys coming tonight.
Nah, I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah.
I was thank for everyone that came out tonight. I think this is an important conversation and
Yes.
definitely should continue.
Yes, our audience is saying mic drop, so that means you guys give yourselves a hand. I really want to thank all of you guys for coming. Devine Lipscomb of RJ. I'm gonna mess up. SRJI. Nick of Renegade Organizing, right? And Terry of the Battle with Moses People. I really thank you guys for coming. I thank all of the audience for being engaged and asking questions. I really hate this was so short because I really feel like this topic and this conversation can go a lot longer than 1 hour when we talk about race and criminalization, because there's so many different parts that you guys spoke of, whether it's the school, whether it's the trying to be rehabilitated after getting out. So it's so many levels. So I really appreciate everyone. Yeah, okay, people already want a part 2, so maybe we'll plan with it
part 2,
you guys.
My brother Sean Kennedy has always says part 2. Anything that he's a part of, he always say, let's do a part 2. I'm gonna give him a t-shirt that says part 2.
Part 2s are great, right? Like Coming to America. Part 2s are always great. So like we'll see it. Yes. So thank you guys so much. And let me make sure our moderators don't have anything else to say. Well, let me let our moderators announce what's happening tomorrow.
Yes. So thank you all so much for being here. Like Tiara said, echo those same sentiments. And speaking of doing a part 2, we don't have a part 2 right now, but we do have upcoming events. So let me just share my screen for a moment here. All right, so for folks that don't know, this event, as well as all the other events we have going on this week, are part of the Honoring Osazi's Legacy 10 Days of Action. March 20th, 2019 is the day that Osazi Osagi was killed by State College Police, and we are honoring Osazi's legacy on the 2-year anniversary of his death. Our events are going on from March 12th to the 21st, so we have more events coming up this week, including a march this Friday, happening in the downtown area, as well as a day-long festival on Saturday. The day-long festival on Saturday and all our events are also to benefit the Osazi Osagi Scholarship Endowment, which was created by the Osagi family. So please so if you scan the QR code that you see here on the screen, it's going to take you to our list of events where you can register for the things that we have coming up on Friday and Saturday, as well as the online virtual events that we have coming up later on in this week. We thank you all so much for being here and for sharing this time with us and for attending this important talk on race and criminalization. And we hope to see you at our upcoming events. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.